Welcome to Scottish Watches podcast. We've got a fantastic episode. This is one I've been looking forward to for a couple of months since the wheels were put in motion to get two of my buddies on the show together. Not here in the UK, not in Geneva, not in Switzerland, not even in Dubai. They're across in America to celebrate some cool stuff. So, special guest, maybe it's guest on the left. You introduce yourself first, then guest on the right.
Oh God, is that your left or my? No, I'm not really sure. Are we reverse? Up to you. That's too kind, Rich. Thank you. Well, hello, I'm Nicholas Bowman-Skygo from Fears Watch Company. It's great to be speaking with you again.
That was very short and sweet. My name's Richard. I am the founder of Studio Underd0g, my little passion project that I started just about 5 years ago now, which is keeping me busy. A few years younger than Nicholas's brand here, but nonetheless, just as exciting, I like to think.
So the first thing I'm going to tell you to do is to check the show notes, play along at home, and click the link in your podcast player. If you're watching us on YouTube, that link will be in the description. That'll take you to our website. You'll be able to see all the tech spec, all the pictures, all the cool stuff that we're going to be discussing in this show. And we've got an action-packed 55 minutes or thereabouts ready ahead of us. So the first real question is, for anybody that's new to you guys, of which there's probably about 10, or anybody that's not heard prior shows of the podcast where you've featured as guests, do you want to give us the extremely quick potted history of, first of all, Fears, because it's older, and then Studio Underd0g?
Certainly. I mean, well, Fears is, 174 years older than Studio Underd0g, I think. So a little bit older. So yeah, Fears is one of Britain's oldest and one of its youngest watch companies. So originally founded in Bristol in the 1840s by Edwin Fear. It then closed in 1976, and 9 years ago, I restarted it and brought it back to life. So my link to it is I'm Edwin's great-great-great-grandson. So an old and young company, but still the same family owning and running it. And so today we're based in Bristol, where we have our boutique, our head office. And we build all our watches there as well now.
Right, Rich, it's your turn. Tell us the story.
Right, yeah, well, my story, as we've said, is a little shorter. We're just 5 years old. My link to the founder is I am he. So, yeah, it was my little passion project that I started during COVID, and I've been fortunate enough to be on your podcast a couple of times over the years, and you've seen the brand grow as more people discover it, and I'm sure many have discovered it through your podcast. So that's what's been keeping me busy for the last few years. And I'd say the last year, 18 months has been our busiest ever. We've had a lot of fun, still learning every day. And that's really how I kind of got to meet Nicholas, actually. I was picking up the phone, probing his brain to try and understand how on earth you're meant to run a watch brand, and we became friends from there.
And it's been a continual success story for both brands ever since. And Nicholas was the first guy that came up to record in person with the podcast back 2019 when we first started. And I think we were the first podcast, Rich, that you came onto on your most unluckiest day ever, when you were robbed twice, your house and your phone when you were out for lunch. So yeah, we've got lots of stuff in the background there, but let's bring people up to speed on what's happening at the moment, the reason you're here today, and let's start off with a wrist check. So you can go first, Rich. Tell us what you got on the wrist today.
Right, well, it's only apt, and actually we didn't even plan this, but of course this is the kind of the star of the show this weekend. I'm wearing the Studio Underd0g Fears Manhattan. So this is We're recording from New York today, so we're here in Manhattan. So it was only apt that we wore this week's launch. So this is our collaboration that I'm sure we'll have plenty of time to chat about shortly.
Almost as if that's the reason you're here today. Right, okay, Nick, what you got on the wrist? Please say it's not the same thing.
No, it's not the same thing. I'm wearing a new wear watch that I got made by Fears because, I try to change it up every so often. So this is something a little bit different. It's a solid 18 karat yellow gold Brunswick, which, I'm getting closer and closer to 40 years old, and I just am getting the lure of wearing yellow gold. So, no, it's a really nice wear. This trip is my first time wearing it, and it's just something very classic, a yellow gold case, white dial, black alligator strap. And in fact, someone last night at an event I was at offered me cash to buy the watch off my wrist. So I was like, okay, this watch is clearly a bit under the radar, but popular. But yeah, no, very, very nice.
Right, so we've got the risk checks out the way. It's time to find out more about the reason you're here today, the reason you're there today over in the States. So, you did a collaboration in the past. It went phenomenally well. I believe it sold out quicker than anybody could blink. And I believe that was at this year's Watchmakers Day, of which I could not attend due to reasons. So, do you want to quickly give us a bit of the history of the previous collab, and that'll lead us up to what we're doing today?
Yeah, well, gosh, it's amazing to think that it was just in March this year. That feels like such a distant memory already. So that was during British Watchmakers Day, we launched the Gimlet, which was our first collaboration, something that we'd been developing for
Quite a few years.
yeah, best 2.5, maybe 2.5
Well,
years.
we originally called it Project 23 because it was going to launch in 2023. And so here we are in 25 and it eventually launched. So at least 2 years went working on this project. But
Yeah, that's true. And Nicholas, I feel like you'd mention that every time we talk about it, and it was me pushing it back, going, "We need to tweak this. I want to improve this." But we got there, and it was well worth the wait. So that was the Gimlet, and pretty much during British Watchmakers Day, the project, the watch got so much love. People were queuing up from the early hours to get hands on with it, which was beyond our wildest expectations. And pretty much that evening, we decided, okay, how on earth can we continue this excitement, continue this buzz? How can we bring this to the States? And we started planning what was the proper Project 25.
exactly. I think, when we go back to March, yeah, we hope people would like the watch. But if you think Fears and Studio Underdog, they're very different brands. And I think from the outside, it's easy to judge a book by its cover, right? I'm usually in a Savile Row suit. Richard is much more casually, if not more stylishly dressed. And so people will often see the two brands and go like, could this work together? And so it was that thing going, we knew with the Gimlet we'd created something beautiful and that we liked it, But the next step is like, actually, would people understand it and would they get it? And yeah, that was the thing on British Watchmakers Day. We were blown away by just, we thought there might be a few people queuing up for it, but no, it was incredible. And that evening, yeah, I think we were having a couple of Gimlets to celebrate and sort of come down from the high of the day. And yeah, it was at a point where it was going, should we have another one? Not just a cocktail, but maybe another watch? And yeah, it started from that moment.
Pretty much by the end of the day, we decided on the cocktail as well. We knew we wanted to bring this to the States. We really wanted to use Windup as a platform. It's a show that we've attended for I think, the last 4 years, which doesn't sound like much, but when your brand's 5 years old, for us, that's a pretty good streak. So it was pretty much written during that evening after a couple of Gimlets that, okay, we're going to launch Manhattan in Manhattan. Which is what we've done. We're halfway through the launch.
You can probably hear from our voices we're halfway through the launch. My goodness, you forget when you're in a room with thousands of people all excitedly talking about watches that just to talk to the person right in front of you, you end up having to shout so much.
Yeah,
but it's good.
The silver lining about I gotta confess. So the Manhattan as a cocktail, not my cup of tea. It's a pretty miserable cocktail. I've had 2 in my life.
What's in it? Because I don't actually know the ingredients.
What's in it? It's hell and fire.
Oh.
So by hell and fire, he means a beautiful bourbon whiskey, some sweet red vermouth, and a bit of Angostura bitters.
Exactly, yeah, that's what
Garnish with a bit of cherry on top. But it is, compared to the Gimlet is strong, but it's very smooth, even though it's citrusy. The Manhattan is kind of like the complete opposite. It is fiery. It is a strong cocktail. And of course, it was invented in the Manhattan Island. But yeah, it's interesting to hear how many people have said over this weekend, like, it's my favorite cocktail. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I think that tells us something about yourself. But it's, yeah.
I have enjoyed it actually, because as Nicholas said, our voices are getting a little hoarse from all the talking, and I have found drinking in Manhattan at the end of the day is quite soothing. It feels like medicine. Yeah, that's why we're here. We've had such an amazing response already. It's currently Saturday morning, so we've done our first day. So I'm glad we've got this podcast in on Saturday morning, because if we were doing this at the end of today, I don't think either of us would be able to make a whisper.
So what happened yesterday then? Obviously, I know, having seen the fallout on Instagram, the queues and everything else. Run us through setup day, arriving, getting ready. How did things progress?
Well, I'm just going to jump in and say, like, I've done over 100 events. You know, I've done launch days, and so I like to think I kind of got things in my stride. I was on the subway heading into Manhattan from Brooklyn, and I get a WhatsApp from Rich, and it's a video from someone, and I'll let him explain what the video was, but I watched this little video with my headphones on the number 4 subway line. And by the end of the video, I was feeling proper anxious about going in. I was like, oh my goodness, what kind of thing are we about to go to? So, yeah.
Well, I'm glad Nicholas, started getting, stressed and anxious, a few hours before the event. Whereas me, I've been stressed and anxious for weeks and months leading up to this. I got sent through a video when I woke up this morning about 6 a.m. The first thing I did was look at my phone, a nasty habit that I have. And it was a video that I was tagged in on Instagram of a gentleman that had already started queuing. We're talking 6 hours before doors at the show, and he was 8th in line. So people got there bright and early.
Several people flew in to New York to see and get the Manhattan Watch, and they literally traveled straight from the airport. They got off on a 7-hour red-eye flight from LAX and came straight to the queue. It was something else. It was incredible.
Yeah, again, beyond, we sort of thought we'd set a precedent, put our mark in the sand when it came to the launch of the gimlet, and this was on another level. But I do think, fortunately, the way we handled the allocations, the first come first served basis, I'm pretty pleased with the outcome so far in terms of most people that have got there and were waiting and were excited. Certainly had an opportunity to get hands on, and we had 150 hopefully happy customers yesterday.
Yeah.
So we've got a big day ahead of us today again. But of course, a lot of people have been asking, if they're not in Manhattan, what does that mean for them? And it's something that we did promise when we launched after the activation of the gimlet. We said, for those of you that couldn't make it to British Watchmakers, we've got something up our sleeve, and I think we're finally ready to sort of to reveal what that is.
I think the thing going down the queue yesterday was, it was just so wonderful to see 3 things. One, how many people were wearing Studio Underdogs, how many people were Fears owners. But I think the third thing that really summed up, Richard said several times about the fact that, we've both done Windup New York multiple times. And I've suddenly realized how many friends we've made in the community here. People that we would only see in New York, they're not coming over to British Watchmakers Day or to Geneva. And seeing so many friendly, familiar faces, it was just really nice. It's sort of, before the event even started, having walked down the queue, I just had that warm feeling of like, oh, this is really nice. Like, it's really nice to catch up with people and get introduced to their partner. And, it was that lovely sense of, that real sense of community.
It almost feels as if wind-up watch fairs are like the Comic-Con for watch enthusiasts.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I would say. I think the thing is, because there isn't any barriers to get in, you don't need to buy a ticket, you don't need to register, you just need to turn up and queue. I mean, as it was, people were queuing right through till mid-afternoon yesterday. It became 1 in, 1 out. It was like, your favorite nightclub in town. But the thing is, the excitement, the buzz. And as I say, the reason we can't talk is because there's no quiet space in the building. It's on 2 floors, there's several rooms, and each room's just packed with people passionately talking. We're friends with a lot of watch brand owners. And so when we were going around chatting to them to see, how first day was going, everyone's just buzzing. And I think that's the great thing. It's good when not just the audience, but also the people who are attending, who run the companies, are, feeding off that energy and just going, yeah, this is brilliant. It's great to be in. So, yeah.
I think another thing that we found, whether it's Windup or any of the other shows that we end up going to, is sometimes it takes a trip to New York for all us Brits to hang out and go for a beer or grab dinner, which is quite funny considering we all live probably just an hour or so or a couple of hours away from one another, and it takes a trip to America or a Chicago.
Brits abroad, right?
Yeah, Brits abroad, exactly. But that's nice. As Nicholas was saying, it's such a good community atmosphere.
No, it is, and Windup, I believe they're celebrating their 10th anniversary this year, so big numbers for Fears next year, half a decade for you, a full decade for those guys. And they're on the up and up. They really are the enthusiast arm of the world when it comes to watches. It's all community based. Yes, there is industry crossover, but the new brands that get to break ground over in the States, and it's not just New York, they've got them all across the country now. They've really expanded, but they've not got too big for their boots. A lot of brands, a lot of companies, they kind of do things and then it falls apart a little bit, but they've really stuck to their guns. They've done really well. But you mentioned there that there might be something for people that maybe don't have visas and passports and can't travel. What's that all about?
So, as we said, when we launched the gimlet, we said we want to do something else with the community, but we also wanted to recreate the buzz of the gimlet in New York. So we were torn, what do we start developing? And we decided at that point to develop two projects side by side. So the original, which we've spoken about, the Manhattan that we've launched this weekend, and something else, something that's still a limited, a limited edition, as kind of a means to celebrate this final tipple of this collaboration. And it was actually the concept came before the design, which is that's a very Studio Underdog approach, actually.
Let me jump in then, because you guys are going to run away like a freight train, and I want to dig a little bit deeper. How do two crazy collaborative design minds get together, fuse together without fighting like cats and dogs?
Time is of the essence. It's not a case of locking yourself in a room for half an hour and going, right, this is going to be a creative session, and at the end of this, we're going to come up with something. It's a case that it's a text here. It's a reply a couple of weeks later. It's a building on ideas until really something clicks. And as soon as something clicks, that's when things move incredibly quickly. So the Studio Underdog approach is often what's the concept first, and that leads to the actual product. But for our watches, so much is about storytelling, whether that's a story that a customer associates with a particular product or the origin story of a watch. An example from towards the end of last year was our unoriginal series, the avocado and the guacamole, which...
Tell everybody about that, because you've not been on since to explain the concept and why you decided to do this.
So this was a really fun project. We had, it kind of fell on our lap. We had first one brand homage us in a pretty obvious way. I'll give them the honor of calling it a homage. And then a month or so later, another and another. So suddenly there was about 7 different brands that had their own watermelon watch, had their own watermelon Studio Underdog. And we thought about what we could do at this point, and we're a young brand. It's not our style to send cease and desists like the big boys. So we thought either we let it slide, and then we saw one of the brands launched the watermelon, and alongside it they launched an avocado, and we don't have an avocado watch. So we thought this is a great opportunity for us to get our own back. So we decided to copy the copycats, and thus the avocado was born. But that's a great example of the Studio Underdog design process, where it's not a design process, it's a story first. And the story that brings us on to, was the launch of the Mimosa, is when Nicholas and I were in, I think it was San Francisco for a wind-up.
Yes.
We had a big night on gimlets.
Oh, that was Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Goodness, my God, how many did you drink that night?
Too many, evidently. Nicholas and I went for breakfast the next morning after far too many gimlets. I think it was the first time I'd tried a gimlet.
Yes, it was, yeah.
Very drinkable, very nice. Anyways, the next morning at breakfast, Nicholas insisted that I have a hair of the dog.
Absolutely, it's got to be done. It's got to be done, the hair of the dog. And, I thought it would perk you up. I think it made you worse, but, it should have worked.
It was a tough day in the office.
Well, also, the thing is, I'd said to you, like, oh, you need, we'll have some mimosas. Now, for Brits, we know what a Bucks Fizz is, orange juice and champagne. In America, they call it a mimosa, tap, faucet, sidewalk, pavement, right? And so you'd never heard of Mimosa. You knew what a Bucks Fizz was. So you're like, what is it? I was like, oh, just make you feel better. And then you gave you this glass and you're like, has this got alcohol in it? It's like, absolutely, it's hair of the dog.
And this was it. So this was probably the seed that was planted well before we even started to think about it. As we said, this was, it was my first gimlet, and probably best part of 2 years later, we launched the first watch.
I thought you were going to say you're now alcoholics.
When we were talking about launching a Manhattan, Nicholas said, like, how do we round off this collection? We're building this cocktail collection. People are excited every time we mention it. How do we kind of round off this final tipple? And Nicholas just sent me a text in all capitals, hair of the dog. And of course, the O being a zero. He still, obviously, of all people, I'm clearly going to pick up on that. But I think he still sent an in brackets. And the zero, and the O is zero is a zero. It was like, Nicholas, I got it, don't worry. But that was the concept. It was like we had this hair of the dog. It makes sense to round out the collection with this concept. And we instantly thought back to that original hair of the dog moment in Chicago. Thank you. And so it had to be the Mimosa. And one thing I'm particularly excited about all three of these watches is it's not just a new colorway or a different concept. Each one has its own sort of technical innovation, its own little story to tell, a technical story.
I mean, I'll say how proud I was of that moment because, Richard explaining the Studio Underd0g approach to watch design. Fizz is quite different. And I think this is one of those differences in our companies. We start with, kind of thinking what colors and textures and shapes will look good. And there often may not necessarily be a story. The story may come later, but, we're starting very much with the physical, which is why I felt really proud when I had this like creative brainwave suddenly of hair of the dog. It's got to be a Mimosa, and that rounds off the three nicely. But I think it's interesting because I, in my head, had an idea of how it could look. But as we'll talk about, there were all kinds of things that Rich and Studio Underd0g have been developing and working on kind of in the background, which I wasn't aware of, which results in something that is sort of starting from where I thought it could be, but ending up in such a better place. And I think that's the great thing. Because the watches are made by Studio Underd0g, it's working with their supply chain, working with their suppliers, working with their designers to really kind of pull out the best of that. And that has been, to the point of like how two companies work together, I think it's run very smoothly. And I mean, it helps when you're good personal friends. But, as they always say, don't work with your friends because it could go wrong. But I think here, because we became friends through the industry, we had that respect of knowing, I trust when he says to me, like, oh, I've had this idea. I'm going to try a sample of this. I'm going to prototype this up. I'm like, okay, that's great. You don't even need to tell me what it is until I see it. And, it's been really, it's been really good to see how these two have developed following the first one, because they're very different. When you put the three watches together, you really feel like it's someone at the bar with 3 drinks together. They're not just the same drink, different glasses, right? All 3 cocktails would be drunk out of a different glass. And I think that's the way to think of these. They're all cocktails, but they're different glasses.
That's a good analogy. Have you just thought that on the spot now? That is 10 out of 10. Guns around. So from the technical side, like what does that actually mean? So the gimlet, we had a full lume dial, our classic O2 series, sapphire crystal on the dial itself to give the floating effect of the numbers. It kind of, represented when you looked at that sort of glassy, silky effect of the gimlet. The Manhattan on the other side, it's richer, it's almost an amber, and we've achieved that. Something that I'm really proud of, actually. The base dial itself is actually a silver radial brush dial, and the sapphire crystal on top of that is colored. So the orange color, when you look at the watch, which is clearly a very orange and elegant watch, all the color there comes from the sapphire itself. So from launching from deciding this in March to launching it yesterday is a pretty short time frame. And when you're mixing materials like this with color, it's not a case of doing an artwork on Illustrator or building out a 3D model. You only know what it looks like when you get samples. And I'm so happy with how these came out. We went through a few iterations. We tried different things. We tried mineral crystal. We tried glass. And eventually we were able to develop an orange sapphire that works beautifully.
And then the thing with the gradient on it, I mean, there were different colors of gradient, because the gradient is actually on that silver disc, and the gradient comes through the orange disc rather than most companies would do it all on one layer. And I mean, this was the exciting thing. You know, I love, one of the parts of my job I love the most is seeing samples and prototype parts. It's just the sudden physical manifestation of everything you've seen on sketches or computer. And so suddenly receiving parcels from Brighton in Bristol and like opening them up and then going through them and seeing them. And it was wonderful, especially with my team, because like it's very different colorways and different techniques to what we used to at Fears. So we were fascinated by this. It was just such a wonderful process.
So then when it came to developing the Mimosa, we were thinking, you know, what can we do here? And this is where I went back to something that we were developing pretty much at the start of the O2 series. As soon as I had this concept of using a sapphire crystal on the dial itself, most brands, we're not the first to use sapphire crystal on the dial by any means, but typically when it is used, it's used as a window. So people will either skeletonize a movement, it's used to showcase something, you know, behind. Whereas we sort of turned that on its head to an extent and used it to create this depth within a dial and have this sort of floating effect. And pretty much from when we started to introduce that concept, I was looking at what does this look like for the future? How do we build on this? How do we innovate? And one of the first things that I wanted to do was see if we could add texture to that sapphire itself. And it's been something we've been developing for years. It's been an absolute nightmare. My original plan was to create sort of an organic wave sort of shape on the top of the sapphire. That was actually the intention, was potentially if Studio Underd0g was to ever introduce a dive watch, that could be something quite interesting, you know, to replicate the waves, the liquids. And finally, we were able to develop a version that it wasn't quite waves, it was an organic shape. It was almost a bit more sort of bubbly, you know,
Like segments, isn't it? Like
little segments, exactly. And suddenly it hit me that this would be a great opportunity to use, as instead of, if we're many years off launching a dive watch, maybe it's something that we could use for a drink to represent a liquid. And so we started developing the Mimosa with this concept in mind. So similar to the gimlet, it's got a full loom dial.
Yeah.
We've packed it out with a ludicrous amount of loom, which is a pretty tedious process, but well worth it. And then sitting atop is this textured sapphire crystal. It's, you know, for those that are interested in the sort of technical elements and how we've achieved that is, you know, years in the making, but we use a 5-axis CNC machine, and every single one we can make about 6 to 8 crystals per day per machine. It's got a pretty high failure rate. It's a pretty tedious process, and then it's polished to obviously bring back its transparency. And this is, you know, this is kind of, as far as I know, a bit of a first of its kind.
I mean, it's something that, you know, when you see the watch, when you handle it, you know, you can see the reason it looks like that, because you're like, oh, it's the bubbles in champagne. You know, it's got this liquid feel to it. But then when you really stop and think about it, you're like, yeah, actually, to have this texture on the crystal. And I mean, when you were telling me the failure rate, it's something like 50% or something. It's crazy, you know.
That's the kind of numbers we hear about from Patek and other brands when they're creating enamel dials, and that's why the cost goes up. It doesn't. You're not just printing something that it comes out the other end 100%. The yield rate is incredible. As a brand I'm speaking to just now that's making a watch for me, and it's now delayed by another 2 months because the dial cracked when they made it.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. It's, you know, these are really complex. And then I remember when we were doing the sampling phase, it was all about which way up was the crystal, because one side is flat and one side is textured. So you're going, it looks completely different depending which way round it is and how the printing sits on it. And it was just, I think it was really exciting because, well, I say exciting. I think there was a moment at some stage where I was thinking, hang on a moment. This is a project we decided at the end of British Watchmakers Day, which was beginning of March, and we knew when it needed to launch. And I was thinking, okay, we're developing and using new technologies, new unproven manufacturing methods for like creating this. We don't know if it will work or not. And yet we're doing this under like probably the tightest 6-month like turnaround from concept to built physical watches. It was like, okay, this is an undertaking, but it came together. It works, and it works really well.
So similar to what I was saying with the Manhattan in terms of not knowing what it's going to look like when we receive samples, it's a similar concept for this this textured sapphire. And one thing that Studio Underdog aims to do is we're playful, we're fun, we make serious watches for serious collectors that don't take themselves too seriously, but we're never gimmicky. And one of the concerns I had was, through adding this texture, is this actually going to reduce the functionality of it as a product, as a watch? And so that's why, as Nicholas was saying, we were playing with how do we work on this printing, which side do we do it on? So we've done it in a way where when you rotate your wrist, when you're looking at the product front on, sometimes you can't even see these bubbles. It just looks much like the gimlet with its flat sapphire crystal. But then as you rotate the wrist, as it catches the light, you get all these bubbles, you get all these weird refractions and reflections. So I'm so pleased with how it turned out. And we've been teasing it as well online.
Yeah.
We knew that when we announced the Manhattan, that for those that couldn't make it to New York to join us this weekend, we knew that we'd experienced some pushback, or we expected some anyway. So we've been slowly letting people know that this is something we've been working on. We've had something up our sleeve. If anyone's visited the Studio Underdog website in the last couple of weeks, it's been encrypted. We've had a little Caesar code for people to try and crack and discover the product themselves. But now, at the time of this recording, it's all out there. It's all live.
Well, this is good because I remember last year you thought ahead, you looked after your enthusiast, your customer base, and new customers that want to get in on the action. Because when you collaborated with Mimosa, you told everybody, Ed told everybody, hey guys, listen, if you can't come, if you can't get this, if you can't get the other, we've got something coming in a couple of weeks' time. And then the salmon was released. So you're always thinking ahead and looking after people, when a lot of brands don't. They're just interested in, quick, make a product, get out the door, put the money in the bank. And with both Fears and Studio Underdog, that's not been the case, because if it was, you wouldn't be here today. You'd be long gone, like everybody that jumped in during the pandemic and then quickly exited things. I've got a question before we move on to maybe more of the technical background of the watch, the details, etc. You were saying there, Nick, when you were looking at the watch and you were putting the sapphire one way and then you looked at it the other way, was there any point in time where both of you went, I like it this way, and the other said, no, I like it that way?
No, I have to say, and I think this is actually been a really interesting thing for me, because it's both our company names on the dial, right? And even though our respective spouses may hate us to admit it, our companies are pretty high up there in things we care about and love and think about day and night. We're both very passionate about what we do, and so when it's a collaboration, it's you're not going to let something go like, oh, fine, I don't like it, but whatever. Like, that's just not in how we operate as watch brand owners. But at the same time, we also have to be very respectful of each other having different opinions, because, our approach to design is different, how we dress is different, what we like is different. So it's finding this kind of beautiful, perfect line. And we were very, very fortunate, because both with the Manhattan and the Mimosa, what Rich did was he would send through the different samples to Bristol. And he would say, I have a favorite, but he wouldn't tell me which. And then it was this case of going, okay, well, I know he's got a favorite. I don't know which it is. So that kind of removes pressure for me to have to feel like I'm more inclined to go down one option or the other. And we were genuinely very lucky that on both watches, the different options we were looking at, we were in agreement on which worked best. And I think that's the power of collaborating with someone who you do actually know. I think that's the thing. You can go like, okay, you can read both our websites, you can read articles about us, listen to podcasts and all that. But it's like when you really know someone and you're really genuine friends with someone, you kind of have this mind meld where it's like, oh yeah, we're on the same page here. But because of the timelines, there was this real worry. And I had members of my team saying to me, they were like, well, what if you don't like something? I was like, well, if I don't like it, I'm going to say it. And they're like, yeah, but it could delay the project. And I was like, yes, but at the end of the day, we can't compromise on this. There's no compromise available.
Nicholas and I are both product people.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important for so many founders. And I think, as Nicholas said, our focus is on getting the product right. And whilst this project has been a relatively short timeline, we've still iterated and developed multiple samples. The best example of that was Project 23.
Yes.
We were meant to launch it 2 years prior, and we didn't because we wanted to get it perfect. We wanted to get it right. So, I've learned from just my few years in industry, it's interesting working with different people. When you work with people who aren't product people, it's about a deadline. It's about the numbers. It's about, it has to launch on X date, and we work backwards from there. Whereas we did the opposite. We didn't have a launch date. We were moving forward until we got to the point where we're ready. The product is ready. People are excited. And I think that's one thing that makes it quite easy to work with one another. For many others, that development process of 2.5, maybe coming up to 3 years, would have caused huge frustration, huge tension, expectations. But that wasn't the case. It was a case of it'll happen when it happens, when we get it right. And I think that is fundamental to, I think that's fundamental to the success of this whole cocktail collection, really.
I think, it's worth doing a little shout out to both our respective teams in Brighton and Bristol because, we came up with this idea after some cocktails at the end of British Watchmakers Day. We then set the date, and everyone knows how uncompromising we're going to be about the actual final product for the reasons you just said. And it's our teams who the next morning on the Monday are being told, right, there's a new project. We're going to try new technologies, new ways of making this. We've got a date in mind. We can't slip on that. That has to happen, and it was that sort of thing where I felt really touched by seeing how both companies, the teams just were like, right, let's roll up the sleeves. Let's do this because, there is a worry as your business grows, as you hire more people, you feel in this kind of pull between being the kind of slightly eccentric and just like, I want to create this amazing thing. And then the reality of like, well, actually, a lot of our team members are going to be the ones who have to actually do the work and actually turn it into thing. It's more pressure on them. But I was really touched by seeing how well the two companies have come together, and we've kind of pulled together as one company in a way, which is really special to see because anyone who's worked with another business, especially in the same industry, but from a very different perspective, will know there can be clash of cultures, but it's been absolutely brilliant.
Well, that's it. We've kind of somehow made that juxtaposition in our personalities and our brands sort of work together incredibly well. And I think people from the launch of the Gimlet through to the Manhattan and now the Mimosa have been surprised at how well these two incredibly different brands at sort of different ends of the kind of the spectrum of their branding and their values, etc., to come together so almost perfectly, and the product makes so much sense as soon as you see it.
I was describing someone yesterday on the stand with the Manhattan watch. It's basically the field watch that Fears has never made, right? And then you look at the Mimosa, and I love the color yellow. It's just such a beautiful, fun, and the shades of yellow and orange on the Mimosa are just gorgeous. But it's interesting because when the first sample arrived in Bristol, it didn't have a strap with it. There were several straps for me to look at, but I immediately popped it on one of my black polished alligator straps, an incredibly formal strap for a very fun watch. And it worked. It just looked like the most fun dress watch you'd ever see.
This is, Nicholas has just said this is, it's almost the Fears version of a classic field watch, right? Pops on alligator strap. It's a full lume dial as well. So if you were out in the field, it would be like a beacon.
Oh, I'll hasten to add, I'm a gentleman explorer.
Well, you've told us the background, the design philosophy, the fact there is this juxtaposition of two brands in the same country, in the same industry, at opposite ends of the design spectrum. But let's pull the dial back, let's look underneath and find out more about the tech aspects of it, the sizing, the price, the movement, when people can get it, how they order it, when they can expect delivery of it.
So yes, as Nicholas said, it's very much a studio Underdog watch when it comes to the supply chain. So it uses the strap tailor for the strap. He's worked with us near enough from the foundation of the Studio Underdog brand. The case itself is developed by Studio Underdog, designed in partnership. It's not just simply a Brunswick case. One of the things, as we discussed with the dial, there's a hell of a lot going on there.
Yeah.
The typical dial is about 0.4 mil thick. The dials on these watches are 2 mil thick. We've got a thick piece of sapphire, multiple layers of bloom, stacking. And what that means is the movement gets pushed down within the case.
Yeah.
So it wasn't just a case of dropping this construction in an existing case design or a case shape. We had to design it from the ground up. That was one of the big things and challenges that took us so long, because not only do you have to develop it from the ground up, because the movement is pushed lower, the crown is also in a lower position. So you really have to design it around the location of the crown, making sure all the proportions work. So it's very much feels and looks like a Brunswick case, but it's its own development.
I'm glad you said this, because people might look at the pictures on a small mobile phone screen and think, oh, they've just squashed stuff into an existing case. But there's so much more.
Oh no, it's very different. And I think this was one of those early moments when we were first working on the case that I felt a bit, worried about, because the Brunswick 38 case, it was our first Brunswick, our first mechanical watch, came out in 2017. It's very much the core, the classic OG fears. And so suddenly kind of going, okay, you're going to rework it, redesign it, remanufacture it. And it was a bit like, oh my goodness, what's going to come out at the end? But what has come out is a case that really fits this 2 mil thick dial, and it doesn't feel out of proportion. And it's very clever. It's about the things like the bezel. On a Brunswick 38, the bezel is polished and domed. On the O2 series Manhattan and Mimosa, it goes concave. It's very, very clever case architecture on this.
I think that's, I guess, one thing that's been missed as well. When you see photos, you just assume, okay, it's a Brunswick case. It's a Studio Underdog dial and movement dropped in a Brunswick case, but it's a total from scratch development. And if you held the classic Brunswick and our O2 series Brunswick side by side, the difference is, especially in the profile, you'd be surprised that it's that they're related in any way, but it just makes sense. So under the hood, the tech spec, we've got our kind of classic workhorse, the Sellita SW210. It's a manual wound movement. Every Studio Underdog watch that we've launched has been a manual wound movement, and part of that logic is I want people to spend a minute in the morning just admiring the dial, the details. That's what makes a Studio Underdog watch a Studio Underdog watch in so many instances. So forcing people to spend a few moments in the morning, not looking at their phone and their notifications, just discover and admire the little details. So fortunately, what all this comes to say, fortunately, effectively, what all this means is you're getting a lot of Fears DNA, but at a Studio Underdog price point. And I think that's something that has really kind of pleasantly surprised the community. I think that's a big reason that people are, queuing up and excited and getting in line like we experienced yesterday. So the Manhattan we've launched here in the US is at $1,300 US or £1,000, and the Mimosa is exactly the same.
Yeah.
I will say the Mimosa dial is quite a bit more expensive to add. So look, I'm not going to try and argue that this is a value proposition, but the dial does cost quite a whack more. But we wanted consistency across the cocktail collection.
Fantastic. And when is it available? How do people get their hands on it? Is it limited to a certain window to order?
So all going well, I believe this podcast is coming out on Monday. So this Thursday, we are launching during happy hours. Again, this was one of Nicholas's brainwaves.
It's happy hour. It's a bottomless brunch. It's all kinds of things.
Exactly. He's very much lending.
I'm trying to go for a job in marketing at Studio Underdog.
Yeah, in future, I'm just, whenever I need to develop a press release, I'm just going to send it to Nicholas and say, look, this is your job, Val. So we're launching on Thursday. A happy hours drop. So what that means is at 3 p.m. BST or GMT?
BST still.
BST still.
British Sun's time.
GMT UTC +1 for everybody.
I'm not going to try and do any of the
3 p.m. UK time.
3 p.m. UK time. Google it. That's what time we'll be launching. What we'll do is we'll open up our order books for a 9-hour window. So from 3 p.m. UK time to midnight UK time, anyone can place an order for the Mimosa. We will fulfill on a first come, first served basis. So it means everyone that does sign up, that does place an order, is guaranteed a watch at midnight. We'll instantly discontinue the product. So it's a limited edition, but it's limited by demand to an effect. So hopefully that puts everyone at ease. There's still often people try and tune in and sign up in the first few minutes because we fulfill on a first come, first served basis. So what that means is the earliest orders placed will be fulfilled from next month. And then it very much depends on how far down the queue you are. I think in terms of our assembly capacity, because we assemble all our watches in the UK, it's something that we're slowly growing out. And we've done a great job, I'd say, over the last 18 months of building out that operation. I believe our allocation is approximately, in terms of assemblies, around 500 per month. So if you're 750th in line, you can probably expect delivery in December or so.
And it's also worth noting, on the advice of my doctor, I won't be drinking many more cocktails with Richard Benz. So this is the third and final watch of the collaboration. There's no secret fourth watch or fifth watch. With the Gimlet, with the Manhattan, with the Mimosa, the three watches go so well together. And I've also, when you think about it, they're the colors of the traffic lights, And so we've done the three together. They work beautifully. But for anyone thinking, oh, maybe there'll be a fourth one coming later on, that's sadly not going to be the case. So I think it's really nice that, with the way we've done the first two, because the fear is we often will launch things at, big events and things. But for Studio Underdog, often it'll be an online drop. So the fact that you've got to do, the physical activation at British Watchmakers Day, Manhattan here, but obviously with that comes geographic limitations, which is why the Mimosa is open globally, but only for those 9 hours.
And exactly why we sort of launched these two side by side rather than going, okay, let's do the Mimosa in 6 months' time or a year's time. We sort of wanted to, to do it together to answer both those questions. And as Nicholas has said, not only are we kind of finalizing this kind of cocktail collection here, it's probably good for our healths as well.
Well, possibly so.
I think one thing I found from launching last year, or a couple of years ago now, the pizza watches, the pizza party watches. Suddenly, my diet went downhill. I was having pizza, a couple of times a week. Now with the cocktail collection, we've been drinking a lot more cocktails than I typically would. Nicholas always sends me photos, so I feel that I must send him back photos, of cocktails that I'm drinking throughout the days and weeks. Maybe the next Studio Underdog release will have to be a salad and water, combo. I think,
or a watch with a beautiful textured dial like aspirin or paracetamol.
Maybe, yeah, exactly.
Well, you could release the low alcohol watch over in LA, something like that. Maybe that could be an idea for the future. But people want to catch up with you guys. Obviously, the show you're at just now is long gone by the time the episode airs and people hear it. But where are you going to be next? What other events have you got for the end of 2025?
Good question. The big one for me that I'm really excited about is Dubai Watch Week. It's the first time I'm going as a brand. First time Studio Underdog is going. But the first time that I'm going as well. I didn't make it to Dubai Watch Week a couple of years ago, so I'm really excited to meet the community there. We're planning a little kind of design lab activation, so it should be a lot of fun for those that come and see us. Kind of as a reminder to myself that I need to set up that part of my website to explain exactly what that is. But I'd encourage people if they are interested or coming to Dubai, to follow us on socials or get in touch, and we'll share details soon.
So Fears won't be in Dubai. However, start of November, on the 1st of November, we will be in Bristol as the proud sponsor of the Bristol Watch Show. So this is the second year the Bristol Watch Show has taken place, and it's a show that focuses not just on British brands, but on British brands within basically an hour's drive of Bristol. So last year we had 10 watch companies there. This year we're going to have 15. We've unearthed some more local Bristolian watch companies. So tickets are available. It will be on Saturday the 1st of November in the Clifton Club in Bristol, just moments away from the Suspension Bridge. So it'll be a really, really good day. And if it's anything like last year, it's certainly worth making the trip for.
I might actually visit this one.
Ah, well, you're always welcome in Bristol.
I think me and the wife, we're due a trip down south, and I did tease it on the show that this will be my final UK appointment of the year because I am spent. I don't know how you guys do it. I really don't. I mean, you're all over the planet. You're always bright and breezy. You guys are recording this 8, 9 a.m. in the morning, having been out last night, having done the whole show, ready to do it again today. I'm just kaput. I'm gone. So yeah, this will be my final of the year, apart from Dubai Watch Week, because that's a holiday. That doesn't even count as work. That is going to a sunnier clime away from the Scottish weather, and then I come back from 30 degrees C to -5 degrees back in Scotland for the Christmas market. So I'm not looking forward to that last part, but it will be great to catch up with both of you guys. I get to see you both in the next couple of months. I'm really looking forward to that. Anything you want to sort of maybe drop, tease, talk about before we leave? Because I think we've got a couple of minutes left.
I'm not sure if my lawyers will allow me. Goodness. No, I mean, just to round off on the point that Rich made at the start about being here in New York at Windup, it is really, really wonderful to see, I remember the first year we were both here, and yes, there was people knew our brand, but compared to this year where it's like, I think almost everyone in the room has heard of us. It's just wonderful to see that kind of, that growth within the community over the years. And like, it's wonderful to see everyone talking about the brands, hopefully positively, amongst themselves. It's been really good to see. It's really encouraging because when you run a watch company and you don't have a co-founder, it can be sometimes a little bit lonely. So, it's really nice to see that.
I think what I'm looking forward to is probably not the next project. It's Christmas, going back to chill out with my family, put my feet up, reflect on the year. As you said, we've been busy traveling, launches. I think, come towards the end of December, I'm just going to be horizontal for a few days, just trying to recoup my energy. But I always try and take the time to stop and pause. It's so easy to keep moving, keep running. It was, I think, Andrew McCutcheon that gave me the advice. He was like, Rich, remember to smell the roses. So I try and smell the roses at Christmas. So I think that's what I'm looking forward to.
I wish that guy would take his own advice in medicine because you guys are busy, but that guy, he doesn't sleep.
I know.
He's an international time zone in himself.
Every time I see him, I do bring it up and I say, are you smelling the roses? I make sure. So it's some good advice, but as these things are, it's sometimes always difficult to implement, right?
Totally. I'm the world's worst. I constantly accidentally forget to have lunch when I'm at events, and it's the wife that says, remember we've not eaten for nearly 24 hours. So yeah, I have to remember the same thing myself. But it's been fabulous having both of you guys on the show, combined, collaborating together. Maybe not in the UK, but further afield. And I'm looking forward to seeing you in real life in the coming months. If you want to check out both of your websites, your Instagrams, they probably already know what it is. We're not going to tell them just now. We're going to tell them to check the show notes. That's where all the stuff we've chatted about will be there in a chronological order. You can go through it, you can click across and set a diary reminder. You don't want to miss out come Thursday. So definitely jump on there. It doesn't matter if you're first, second or 100th in the queue. As long as you're in the first couple of thousand, you'll probably get your watch sooner rather than later. And that is us. So thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and we'll catch you again soon.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.